Voilà. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 12th edition of Why the World Needs Anthropologists, Centering the Periphery. We are broadcasting live from a studio here in Ljubljana, Slovenia. Anja and I are not alone. We have a wonderful audience full of young and inspiring anthropologists.
By the way, Gasper, nice outfit. Where did you get it?
Thanks, Anja. My dad wore it to his prom in the 80s.
Oh, really? Wow. Wow, this funky pattern is making us all dizzy. So as you can see, this year's theme, actually vibe, is retro 80s. So we hope this topic will connect people from all over the world and make it an unforgettable event for everyone. And I'm sure no one will forget your shirt, Gasper.
We hope this event will take us back to the days of Madonna, David Bowie, Stevie Nicks, Pet Shop Boys, Bananarama, Depeche Mode, The Bangles, Tina Turner, The Cure, Whitney Houston, The Police. The list goes on and on.
Oh, and don't forget the rhythmics, Gasper. So over the past few weeks, people from all over the world have been talking about centering the periphery. They've gathered in different places and had serious and not so serious conversations about our topic.
That sounds amazing. Today's event will be less like a boring online conference and more like television.
So let's turn on the television. Gasper, what do you want to watch?
Yeah,
Movies?
good idea. Let me see what's on the TV schedule. Oh, it's EASA's channel.
Ebe Vesuri is an emeritus researcher at Venezuelan Institute of Scientific Research in Caracas, Venezuela. The title of her TV show is Periphery, Always a Curse or Could Be a Blessing.
That sounds interesting. Put it on.
The periphery, always a curse, could it be a blessing? Well, thank you for allowing me to share with you these few moments of conversation. The topic that I chose in connection with the general theme of this session has to do with my comment on a particular group of people who inhabit the peripheries, not natives, not peasants, not the very members of the scientific communities that grew in these new nations, ensuing decolonization. That is, physicists, chemists, biologists, engineers, economists, very different people, but also anthropologists that inhabits the periphery. For decades, scientists and intellectuals in what came to be known as the Global South have complained about peripheral conditions, marginalities, asymmetries, exclusions, invisibility, backwardness, underdevelopment. However, we cannot forget also that the grievance was also voiced at different times in the so-called advanced countries, with reference to their disregarded hinterlands as producers of irrelevant, backward science. Some of us sought to understand what was involved in peripheral science. That is, the scientific activity carried out by people from the former colonial and new countries in the South, usually lacking scientific traditions, with poor, insufficient infrastructure, scarce presence of rigorous criticism in the social milieu, international invisibility because of lack of recognition of what they were doing, and interested in research topics that were commonly disregarded by the mainstream that considered them redundant and unglamorous. Well, but although the periphery did not interest the center, scientific activity grew there anyway. And in Latin America in particular, the term burst into academic and public discourse, particularly since the 1980s, seeking to explain an important social change that had occurred there. There is the growing regional and national production of science. Such developments introduced a buzz in the concept of canonical international science, since they highlighted specificities and nuances of scientific activities in the usually marginal context. Why? Because cultural diversity inevitably breeds novelty. But taking some anthropological images of this, we have Apadurai's image from 1986. This is in a paraphrase, Latin American science, we might say, that still looked like an anthropological black hole where a variety of ideas, findings, and possibilities would vanish from the metropolitan gaze. Or we can take another one, Hanners, in around 2010, I think. It might be said that anthropology, as a global discipline, has not managed to create a cosmopolitan public commentary such that the broadest perspectives in relation to mankind are clearly evidenced. So the progress with lost knowledge to the world. Tension and ambivalence in the position of intellectuals who were spatially part of the periphery, but whose mental maps, because of their professional education, revolved around the metropolis, have long been perceived not just as painful personal experiences by scientists and intellectuals from the peripheries, but as having overall damaging effects on science because of the knowledge loss. Parallel to this, the internet phenomenon that emerged seemed to push the world towards a kind of global ubiquity that was expected only to intensify. A couple of decades ago, for example, cultural theorists like Manuel Castells from Spain were describing how globalization breeds sameness and monotony, charting the declining importance of physical geography. But contrary to what was expected, we currently witness a world where a process of fragmentation unfolds, uncontrollable violence fueled by a series of what we might call endemic, present, hatreds of immigrants, minorities, of various so-called others. That is rampant. The local worlds, on the other hand, include remote provincial groups, marginal communities, and heterogeneous actors, be they scientists, businessmen, civil society, indigenous groups, peasants, and other people. That is the classical world of anthropology. But despite abundant rhetoric to the contrary, the deep prioritization, or I don't know whether that word exists, deep prioritization of the local is a real problem. A common reaction to discourses coming from distant provincial territories is to either ignore, minimize, or dismiss them. Scientists working in such regions must deal with this when they wish to prove the value and applicability of their own research. The mention and inclusionist strategy that is often found in discourses at the national level of decision making produces the effect that merely lip service is paid to local critical voices that continue to remain outside and to be irrelevant. It is as if the mere mention of them already includes them, but it's not true. They are not even looked at, not paid any attention at all. Well, I would like to comment very, very briefly on a recent research study that we carried out with other colleagues, investigating processes around mining, salmon farming, and wildfires in both Argentine and Chile and Patagonia, enhancing their territorial nature. In view of the negative impacts such extractive activities have on the environment, scientists in both countries tend to support local research lines strongly consistent with their territories' particularities. There is a local gaze that is very concentrated there. But while local environmental conflicts and socio-technical controversies move scientists, governments, and citizens fundamentally to build decentered research agendas, the nature of extractive activities actually articulates territorial specificity with concerns of global agendas around climate change and its effects, conditions, and causes. Thus, we witness that relationships between micro-territories and global macro-transformations induce a rich micro, meso, and macro dynamic. Ongoing political debates in Chile and Argentina are a major part of the concern about new claims to the spatial organization and use of the territory in both countries. Decentralization aims to give rise to broader, more interconnected networks, especially at the margins, in which power has been redistributed. Decentered knowledge seems better able to face today's great challenges. Distributed agency, produced through decentralized decision-making processes, responds to the need of recognizing other different people as knowing subjects within epistemic communities. So the time seems to have come for local anthropological contributions to gain a place in metropolitan socio-political discourses. Anthropologists are intervening actively and increasingly as individuals and as collectively organized political subjects in public and state arenas where major issues are debated. The resolution of existing tensions will depend on how the combined dynamics of centers and peripheries evolves in the reproduction and correction of asymmetries, including other voices, epistemic perspectives, and knowledges that have been obliterated by the cognitive imperialism in remote outposts. Anthropologists then are in a privileged position to accompany these processes. Thank you.
Listening to Hebe was certainly a blessing, not a curse.
Yeah, I agree. So, by the way, Gaspar, which is your favorite movie from the 80s?
E.T. Did you know, Anya, that E.T. was the most popular film of the 80s?
No, I didn't know that. I bet everyone was scared that E.T. would take them to his, I don't know, space periphery or something.
Yeah, and E.T. would probably say, "Center phone home."
Okay, so should we switch to another channel?
Yeah, let's see what's next.
It looks like we need to repair the planet from the periphery. This is the exact title of our next presenter.
And how can we do that?
I have no idea, but Samuel will know.
Samuel Moses Ntapanta is a postdoctoral fellow at the Department of Anthropology at Aarhus University, Denmark, and he's originally from Tanzania.
So let's play it. Samuel Moses Ntapanta.
Hello the world and anthropologists. My name is Samuel Moses Ntapanta, a postdoc at the Department of Social Anthropology at Aarhus University. I'm here at the heart of the Silicon Savannah, and this is Nairobi, the cradle of digital financing and the home of M-Pesa. I'm here to investigate the social life of cryptocurrencies as they are adopted in the global south. But that is not the presentation I'm doing to you today. 800 kilometers from here lies another mega city, and that is Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. These two cities share a lot of features, apart being the center for innovation and creativity. They also share the language, but they also share one feature that I want to present to you today, and that is the repairing industry. Walking down streets of Dar es Salaam or Nairobi, you will encounter hundreds of repair cafes. These are not warranted cafes, these are third-party repair cafes. Here, you can repair anything from electronics to cars to anything. In these two cities, brokenness is not a feature. Anything that breaks can be fixed. With me here is my iPhone 11. I cracked it a few weeks before traveling to Nairobi. In Denmark, this will cost me around 2,000 Danish kroners, approximately $300 US. But what I want to show you is how this phone can be fixed in time with a reasonable price. So, this is why the world needs anthropologists. Follow me as I walk down the streets of Nairobi trying to fix this phone.
But it's here.
So when we'll be going to town,
So, we are now arrived at Moi Avenue. This is a street located at the Nairobi Central Business District. I've been brought here with by my friend Felix to one of the best repairers in Nairobi. Habari kaka? Ndio ndio. Sasa na shida na hii simu ni iPhone 11 imekraki back ya nyuma. Vipi? Inatengenezeka?
Simu kwa sababu yafanya vipi yatengenezeka?
Ndio. Spare sasa unazo au?
Spare ziko. Ziko tayari kala tofauti kulingana na simu.
Sawa. Itachukua muda gani sasa? Kukamilika.
Kukamilika itachukua dakika 30
minutes. That's nice. And sasa bei inakuwaje mzee?
Bei si ghali, 9 pekee.
Ishukisio 8 ndugu yangu. Tukupe 8.
Pamoja na leba usifanye 8 na 500.
Hapo napo umenibana mimi na 8 tu.
Sijakubana sana.
Basi sawa, 8,500 ni sawa. Sawa. Kwa hiyo nikae subira, unaweza nikatembea kidogo alafu nitarudi.
Bila wewe utamwenyewe utataka unataka uigoje ama
30 minutes.
30 minutes itakuwa.
Basi asante sana. Haya. una namba ya yule jamaa. Unaweza kuitoa hilo nini? Tupo tayari.
Tayari.
In April this year, 2024, the European Union passed right to repair directives. These directives aim at making repairing easy and affordable within the EU region. This act or these directives are actually tackling what I call disembedded consumption, whereby through the infrastructures that has been built by techno-capitalism, by making electronic devices difficult and expensive to repair, so that consumers within the European Union, instead of repairing, they have to opt to buy new devices. However, when you come to East Africa, on the street of Nairobi, as I showed you a little bit earlier, repairing and repairability of devices is embedded in the consumption culture. Consumers within East Africa, they focus and aim when buying new devices, are the devices repairable? Are they difficult? Are they expensive to repair? The amount that I pay today to repair my iPhone is actually a huge amount that many people within East Africa will not actually opt to. But however, this embedded consumption that repair and repairability thought through is actually culminate the culture and widespread of these repair kiosks that I showed today. So what that I wanted to show you in this presentation today is how the rest of the world, especially the Western world, can learn or look at repairing practices within East Africa or within the global South, and how these practices can actually improve our consumption patterns, but also address issues of greenhouse gases and climate change. Thank you very much. Asante sana from Nairobi.
So, as our next presenter, Rosanna Guber will explain the Global South, despite being a rich field of study, often feels like a bit of trying to join a global conversation with a Wi-Fi signal that doesn't really work. They keep calling out, "Hello, we are there too."
Today, you are heard loud and clearly, and we hope this event won't just strengthen Wi-Fi signals, but also foster greater collaboration between the center and the periphery.
Rosanna Guber is a senior researcher at Argentine Council of Science and Technology. Her show is called Southern Anthropology's Displaced Center, or How to Help Northern Anthropology to Disregard the South.
Oh wow, let's check Rosanna's Gruber show. Ladies and gentlemen, Rosanna Guber.
Hi to all dear colleagues, wherever you are. I would like to share a few ideas on the title of this meeting, Centering the Periphery, an interesting way of putting a number of issues together that we may face and discuss. In the first place, the periphery seems to be in the South, so that both periphery and the South appear to be synonymous. Even though my Mexican colleague Esteban Crotz has warned us since the early 90s that there are Norths in the South and Souths in the North, I refer to his most famous article, Las Antropologías del Sur, published in Spanish and English. Truth is that the South is acknowledged as the periphery of the world, meaning wealth, power, development, and even well-being. The point is that the South is acknowledged as the periphery of anthropology as well. What does this mean to our discipline? As I see it, there are two sides of the coin. One is to assume that the periphery deserves attention and interest, which it already does. The South has long been the field of our discipline. Such an interest stems from the image of the South as distant and exotic. In fact, the South has been the core of exotism and therefore the center of anthropological fieldwork. The other side of the coin shows that the South as periphery also refers to us anthropologists who partake the peripheral conditions of poverty, underdevelopment, and delay of the southern countries where we live in, where we do fieldwork, where we teach, study, write, and publish. That is, as southern anthropologists, we seem to carry on peripheral and underdeveloped anthropologies. I think that we must reflect upon the meaning of to center the periphery in reference to us, anthropologists. In this respect, we Southern anthropologists claim to be taken seriously enough in the global debates of anthropology, in core publications, and in global bibliographies. Why? Why are we asking for this? Because this hardly happens. As central anthropologist Clifford Geertz once taught us, centers are constantly made together with and thanks to the peripheries, and even from the peripheries, as also taught us Cardoso and Faleto, González Casanova, Wallerstein, and many, many others in the North and in the South. Many years ago, Argentine-Brazilian colleague Federico Neyburg used Geertz's paradox of charisma to look at October 17th, the cradle of Peronism. Let's remember this paradox. Briefly put, though charisma is rooted in the sense of being near to the heart of things, of being caught up in the realm of the serious, its most flamboyant expressions tend to appear among people at some distance from the center, indeed, often enough, at a rather enormous distance, who want very much to be close. Populism notwithstanding, this quote makes me think of Southern anthropology as a charismatic métier, talking to the center from a rather enormous distance, although it wants very much to be close to the center. How is that enormous distance produced in the internet era? Latin American anthropology seems to be part of the anthropologies of the South, but its center is far away. Even though there are thousands of journals, podcasts, web pages, archives, and excellent, good, and regular dissertations, as it happens everywhere else, since the 80s, Latin American anthropologists have been trained to believe that real concepts, theories, and authors can be found mainly or only in the North. Internet has played a crucial role in approaching the North to the South. Also, the concentration of scientific, usually English-speaking publishers, and the Northern and Southern requirement that we must publish there. There is also the unknown referee's suggestion that we have to attend Northern debates and quote Northern readings. Not just Northern, North Atlantic, not Northern. And we Southern anthropologists comply. We want to believe that we are part of global debates in anthropology, even though those global debates are far from the South. And most importantly, they are far from our fields. Two simple suggestions in order to end up this short speech. One is that anthropologists be more sensitive to the link between fields and theories. If Bourdieu, Ingold, or Foucault can lend us the overall understanding of world issues, something goes really wrong with us, not with them. Another suggestion is that Northern anthropologists be less ethno and nation-centric and study Southern intellectuals as their colleagues, not as natives or helpful people to be acknowledged. Maybe Northern and Southern intellectuals can read Ebe Vessuri, Vessuri, the 2016 Bernal Prize in Social Studies of Science, the first researcher, an anthropologist, who is not from the North Atlantic area. We would all learn a lot from her. This is all for the moment, and thank you for your patience and for your listening.
Our next TV star is an aspiring badminton player. She's practicing hard to compete one day.
Oh, do you mean Gayatri Sridharan? I bet she plays badminton with some classical 80s dance moves. Imagine that.
Yes, she's also the founder of Anthropy and EASA.
Should we put on her show? The title of her show is Failures and Obligations when Centering the Periphery.
Yes, let's do that. Ladies and gentlemen, Gayatri Sridharan.
Hi, my name is Gayatri Sridharan. I'm a resident of Delhi in India. I'm also an applied anthropologist. I work mostly in India. And I just want to quickly thank the team at WWNA for giving me this wonderful opportunity to record this talk, this little video. I also want to thank you for doing what you do, what you've been doing for the last 12 years, keeping the conversation going on why the world needs more anthropologists. So congratulations on that. Today, they've given me the opportunity to talk to you, whoever is listening to this, to talk to you about a project that I failed at, a project that is a labor of love, and it involves applying anthropology, and it involves centering the periphery, believe it or not. For the last decade of me working and calling myself an applied anthropologist, I have also researched purely, mostly for academic purposes, a small tribe, maybe about 6 to 7,000 members strong, living in a remote corner of the country that I think even Indians are not completely aware of. This tribe is called the Lisu. They're also called the Yobin. And they live in a state called Arunachal Pradesh. And Arunachal Pradesh is a fairly large state, but the part where they live, the Lisu tribe lives, it resembles a little finger. Like it looks like on a map, it looks like a little finger stuck in some sort of a pot pie, and the pot pie being northern Myanmar. This stretch of land, which looks like a little fingerling, is actually, of course, on the ground, it's quite large. And it is home to one of the largest national parks and tiger reserves that India has. It's called Namdapha National Park. It's home to a wonderful range of flora and fauna. I mean, park authorities, wildlife authorities discover a new, species of flora or fauna there every year. It truly is a celebration of clean air, water, and nature. And in and around this park largely, the Lisu tribe lives alongside a couple of other tribes, the Chakma, the Nepali community. There's a Nepali community, Nepali Gorkha community that lives alongside them. The Lisu have lived in these parts for several decades, preceding India's independence and then stretching into, of course, to the present day. I was intrigued by their story, and I visited them for the first time in 2013. And of course, I found that they struggled for a lack of public infrastructure, roads, electricity. They struggled for a lack of access to health, to governance, to education, to subsidies, everything that the rest of us in the mainstream kind of take for granted, that we know that we're entitled to. But for that community, because several families lived inside the park and many families were cut off because of the park. At that point, there was no, when I first visited, and for several years after that, there was no road. They didn't have a road going through the park, so they couldn't access the towns on the western side. That's why the community struggled for decades and decades on end. Nevertheless, I found quite amazingly this community, despite being a cut-off hill tribe, or a tribe that once had been described as anarchist by anthropologists trained under Edwin Leach or James C. Scott. This tribe, the community that I met, was significantly attuned to the national conversation on democracy, politics, education, popular culture, Bollywood. And more, what I found to be amazing was that despite being, despite their ancestors being anarchists several centuries ago, there's a great demand for the mainstream, for proximity to the mainstream. Now, of course, in the last decade, things have improved. The Indian government has been able to build a road through the park so that, things are much better, of course. And of course, the community cultivates commercial cash crops in order to be able to secure cash incomes, but they're not a stable source of income. and it still makes them vulnerable. One of the major ways in which that affects them, that instability still affects them, is that they cannot be sure that they'd be able to send their children to school every year. They might be able to send a child to school for the first 2 years, or for the third or fourth, or maybe even through primary school, but maybe not after that, maybe not right up to the 10th, maybe not for extra tutorial classes, which are a thing in India. That is something that has bothered the Lisu for a long time, and since I've researched them and I've written papers, and according to some tribal elders, I have gained some amount of attention as a result of that. I was some people sat me down in 2019 and gently, politely asked me, how are you going to give back to the community that has helped you so much? So that was where my my experience trying to move from being a purely academic observer to becoming an applied practitioner in that scenario. That's where that started. I asked them, how do you want me to apply myself? What would you like me to help you with? The demand was for a school. Help us build a school, help us fundraise. And so we did that for 2 years, and COVID came right after, and we struggled. We didn't get anything. And then in 2021, young, creative, energetic Indian civil services officer, a district commissioner, I ran into him, and he declared that he was already working on educational outcomes. And then I realized I don't have to apply myself to work on that problem particularly, but the problem with sustainable livelihoods remained. The sustainable livelihoods that wouldn't cause damage to the environment, damage to Namdapha National Park, but at the same time would give the Lisu and other communities farming in that vicinity a stable source of income. And so we continue to apply ourselves to that. Since 2021, we have continued to go to multiple donors, investors, angel investors. We have proposed designs and ideas, and we've proposed measurement. We've drawn up standards of success, and we've drawn up measurement plans, and each time we've been questioned on how we could possibly imagine that significant impact could be had in such a small sliver of land with only a few thousand farmers in a part of the country that remains invisible. That's where I have failed as an applied practitioner. I'm still not sure how to change the rhetoric, how to change my marketing tactics, how to apply myself in a different way to win funding over. That's not to say there aren't more altruistic, more humane donors out there. We are still, there are one or two funders that we're still in conversations with. They've allowed to give, they've actually expressed an interest to talk with us more than once, which is a big deal. But why this is important, even if this fails, even if we fail after a few more years, I want to mention why I find that, this is important to me as an applied practitioner. It's because I owe the Lisu. I owe them my life, and quite literally. Just between 2017 and 19, there have been other incidents in other years, but just between 2017 and 19, Lisu guides who helped me, travel into the forest with them, different guides have saved my life at least on 3 occasions. On one occasion, I very nearly fell into a river and somebody pulled me up single-handedly in order to, with a 12 kg backpack on my back. Otherwise, I would have been a goner. Another time, I was stranded in the middle of the Namdapha National Park forest without food or water and with an injured left foot, unable to walk, and someone came running with help the following morning. Another, traveling tribesman from another tribe gave me a little bit of dried fish and rice to eat on that night. There are stories like that, but I'm sure you get it. Just these two incidents are enough. But even if these two, even if I didn't owe them my life, I still find that there is a moral obligation. We as ethnographers, we go and we embed ourselves and we live with people for weeks, months at a time. And then then we don't ask ourselves, very often we don't ask ourselves how we're going to give back substantially in terms that are useful for the community, in ways that are useful for the community. And so I find that somewhere between academic observation and moral obligation, that's where, I had to start applying myself as an anthropologist. That's when I really became an applied anthropologist. That's what I wanted to talk about today. I'd love to hear other stories. I can't wait to hear what other contributors to the conference have to say, what stories they have, what findings they have. If you like, please come find me and share your stories about becoming an applied anthropologist and how you keep going despite failure. Please share those stories with me so that I'm inspired and I can keep going as well.
Gasper, I think that was enough TV for today. What do you think?
No, I want to watch more television, Anya. But what about Carla's show?
Well, you're not gonna believe it, but Carla is here.
No way. Isn't she busy scuba diving?
Yeah, Carla knows how to scuba dive, so I hope she didn't scuba dive all the way from Delaware.
Carla Guerón Montero is a professor of anthropology and the director of the Center for Material Culture at the University of Delaware.
Please welcome our special guest, Carla Guerón Montero. The title of her talk is Centering Ethnography from the Periphery. Carla, come here.
Thank you so much. Is it on? Yeah. Thank you so much, Anya and Gasper. I'm enjoying this so much. And now it's time for me to share a little bit about my story. Okay, perfect. Thank you. First of all, I wanted to note that I have been coming to this Why the World Needs Anthropologists conference for almost all of the time that it has been going on. And I do it every year because I find it iconoclastic and interesting. It's always different. I always learn something new. So that's why I'm here. And that's why I'm here to share just a bit of my journey with all of you. And I'm going to start there. I'm going to start with a quote by pioneer anthropologist Esther Newton, who studied for the first time in the United States gay and lesbian communities as well as drag queens. She was the first one who did this, and this is the quote that we have for her. She says, "Anarchism is an ideology of permanent rebellion. Anthropology, by refuting any one culture's claims to absolute authority, offers a permanent critique." And while I fully agree with this comment, I do think that anthropology can offer a permanent critique. I think that it has failed to have an understanding of the Global South. And in that way, it has given absolute authority to the Western canon. Now, my experience as an anthropologist might help us illustrate why it's important for us to think about the Global South, to think about the periphery, and to understand that kind of anthropology as any other kind of anthropology. I am originally from Quito, Ecuador. I was born and raised there, and I am what you would call a mestiza, that is a mixture of indigenous and Spanish ancestry, and I come from the middle class. And you, most of you are anthropologists here, you might agree with me that many argue that those of us who become anthropologists do so because we are critical of our own society. We want to find out what is happening elsewhere in order to return the gaze and understand our own societies better. And that is what happened with me. I was always very curious about some of the things that I saw in my own country as a small child. For instance, I was puzzled at the fact that I was taught since I was a tiny little girl that I needed to kiss everyone I met, to give them a hug. And then suddenly, I couldn't do that with a shoemaker or a maid or perhaps a carpenter. I was very curious about that. Why is it that those persons are prohibited from my kisses and my greetings? I'll give you the answer later. So hold on, please. Even though my parents didn't receive an education at the university level, so I am a first generation graduate, I was always encouraged to study, always encouraged to learn and to go to school, and the same thing happened with my sister. When I decided to become an anthropologist, my father was not very happy about that. He was not happy about the choice. He thought that I was going to starve to death. And he worried very much about that. I'm happy to share that he's very, very happy that that did not happen. And he simply is happy as well with the fact that I chose what I absolutely love to do. But in reflecting on my father's words, I understand why he was so concerned. And perhaps here in the room, those of you who are students of anthropology might have the same experience today. Your parents wondering, what is my child going to do with anthropology? Because anthropology continues to be in many ways a very exotic discipline. And challenging that idea that anthropology has no use or has a very limited use is exactly what we do in conferences like this one. That's why we have a conversation and a discussion about why the world needs anthropologists. I just want to share another anecdote with you. I often share this with my students as well. I explain to them how come I'm so fascinated with the topic of race and ethnicity, which is one of the topics I have studied for many years. And I'm having trouble with this. Okay, so, and this particular painting is what motivated me to study race and ethnicity. When I was an undergraduate student, we didn't have funds to actually buy books, so what we had were black and white photocopies of books. That's what we used to read. And in one of the history books that I had to read, there was a photocopy of this particular painting. And I was immediately fascinated by it because it is a very complex painting. It is a painting by the mestizo painter, Andrés Sánchez Galque in 1599. He was from the Quito School of Painting, and it depicts one mulatto person, that is a mixture of a black person and an indigenous person, in a position of authority with his two sons, but he's wearing indigenous jewelry and he's dressing in Spanish clothes, also having spears. So there's a whole mixture of things going on here, and I was incredibly taken by the painting and by the whole possibility of understanding what was happening in this particular painting. So the painting itself is called Mulatos de Esmeraldas, and what it depicts is the Republic of Zambos, or República de Zambos, which was a very, very prominent maroon town that had quite a bit of power in the 16th century in Ecuador. And the Spanish authorities had to level with them in order to have access to the riches of that particular province. And unfortunately, they didn't do well to the agreements in which they had, and the entire republic disappeared. But for me, the key point is that I wanted to understand how come all of these mixtures are present in one particular painting. And as a result of that, I decided to study race. It was also combined to the understanding of ethnicity, class, and gender as well. And when I was able to be a student of anthropology in my undergraduate years, I also understood clearly why I was not supposed to greet the shoemaker, the maid, or the carpenter with a kiss. The reason for that was that I was born in a very, very colonial country that made clear distinctions based on race, based on ethnicity, based on class, that separated people who were not from the mestizo class from everyone else. And as a result of that, I was not allowed to have connections with people who were not like me. That profound colonial legacy of my country, I will say that unfortunately continues today in many, many different ways. Now, a positive point that I would like to share with you is that I had the opportunity to see the painting in person when the painting traveled to the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and also 2 years ago, 2 years ago, I actually had the opportunity to visit the Museum of the Americas in Madrid, Spain, where the painting is located. And for me, it was just incredible to be able to actually see the colors, all the features of the individuals in this painting, because it has meant quite a bit for me. Another point that I want to make has to do with this conversation that we're having about the center and the periphery, the global south, the global north, and that is that the education that I received in Ecuador was very, very rigorous, very intense. I learned about all the classic ethnographies and all the classic anthropologies that we all learn about from the Western canon, but I also learned about Latin American and Ecuadorian anthropologies, quite a bit actually, and that helped me understand that anthropology is not one only anthropology. Anthropology is anthropologies in plural, and that's something that you have been hearing over and over again in this conversation. I also learned that there shouldn't be distinctions between practicing and or applied or engaged anthropology and academic anthropology. That is the purview of some societies. Some societies have established that difference, but many other societies, like the one in Ecuador, for instance, have not. Anthropologists navigate seamlessly between applied anthropology, between practicing anthropology and academic anthropology. For a number of reasons, including the fact that because of economic reasons, one needs to have more than one job in order to survive, right? So in order to do that, you need to have an ability to navigate a number of different worlds. That is what you see in the anthropology of the global south, such as examples that were provided by Rosanna Guber, for instance, a few minutes ago. So once I graduated from the Catholic University in Quito, I received a fellowship to do my master's and my PhD in Oregon, Oregon State University, and then the University of Oregon. And I felt that I was very prepared for my graduate studies, and that actually makes me proud. I have conversations with colleagues from Ecuador who agree that our preparation was very solid, and it gave us the opportunity to continue studies elsewhere. In my case, my only limitation was English. I had to learn and perfect English. It's not perfect yet, of course, but have it good enough so I could have an understanding and a conversation in this language, and obviously write in this language. So when I was doing my master's studies, I did my fieldwork in Ecuador, just like I had done for my bachelor's studies, working on understanding development projects in a small village in Ecuador that is composed of peoples of African descent. And I thought that I was going to do the same for my PhD, and a casual comment by my advisor, Philip Young, made me realize that I didn't have the obligation to go back to Ecuador necessarily, that if I was interested in understanding other societies, I could do it. And for me, that was an incredible revelation. I never assumed that I could fulfill my dream of exploring the world and also be able to understand other societies from my vantage point. It also made me realize that the reason why so many anthropologists in the Global South study their own societies is not lack of curiosity, but lack of resources. It also made me understand that many anthropologists make a commitment to continue to study their societies as native anthropologists in order to combat social injustices, and that's the only way to do it. So there are a number of different reasons why staying in our own societies is important. But in any case, I chose to have the opportunity to explore and study other societies, and I had the opportunity to go to Panama, which was the country where my advisor had spent almost 30 years at that point studying with indigenous peoples. And because I was so interested in understanding the African diaspora specifically, I had the opportunity to go to a location with a very, very unusual name, Bocas del Toro, the archipelago of Bocas del Toro, and that's where I conducted my fieldwork. And initially, my objective was to continue my understanding of racial and gender relations, but when I arrived there, I realized that wanted it or not, I had to study tourism, because that was the phenomenon that was being imposed in this society at that particular time, that was in the 1990s, and that needed to be understood and studied. For me, it was a difficult leap because I had had a very classic training in anthropology, and tourism was not considered a topic of interest for anthropologists, for a number of reasons. I won't talk about that. But it took me a while to accept and recognize that tourism, was a possibility, was an interesting topic, and was a topic that could allow us to understand some of the major questions that anthropologists think about, such as what it means to be mobile or immobile, how do people make a living, and how do people determine who is a stranger and who is part of their culture. All of those questions we can actually answer through the study of tourism. So I continued to be interested in tourism, and I studied that for quite some time. In fact, I have been studying tourism one way or another in connection with food, in connection with national, local and regional identity construction, nation building, place making, and several other topics, always through the lens of tourism studies. I have done this in Panama for the most part, but also in Grenada, in the Lesser Antilles, and in Ecuador. And in a very interesting turn of events, I also, in going back to the 16th century and the painting that I mentioned to you, it moved, it did something. I'm not managing this very well, I'm sorry. I had the opportunity to work with Quilombola communities, Maroon communities in Brazil, and also understanding how they are using tourism as a means to attain sovereignty. So to me, it's almost a circle in terms of my experiences. Okay. Nowadays, I'm also working in identifying nuanced ways to understand some of the concepts that the anthropology of tourism and tourism studies have used, which have been too binary in its determination. So for instance, nowadays I'm thinking about what it means to be a migrant, what it means to be a person of a particular location, what it means to be a tourist, at which moment, etc. Or also what it means to be a cosmopolitan traveler versus a sedentary worker. All of those terms might seem obvious and unchanging, but in fact they are not. And that's one of the topics that I'm more concerned about nowadays. So I mentioned already that because my training had been so different in Ecuador, when I went to the United States, I was surprised at the distinction, at this very, very dramatic separation between applied anthropology and academic anthropology. I would say so-called applied anthropology and academic anthropology. And I became committed to trying to find a way to change this. And by the way, this has been going on since the 1960s, this effort by anthropologists from the Global South to change these dynamics in terms of the distinction between the disciplines, and also in terms of understanding anthropology as if it were only one, as if it only could come from the hegemony. Right? So for me, what is puzzling, once again, is this problem or issue with anthropology where we are trained to be curious. We are trained to be always open, always alert, always trying to understand the other, on quotations, of course that is problematic, and yet at the same time, we lack curiosity when it comes to understanding peoples from the periphery who are doing studies. How come that is possible? How come our curiosity ends when we are working with the other as an informant? And that was a comment that was also made in one of the videos. I think that that's very, very problematic. And in other words, what we are all doing today is decolonizing the discipline. It might sound like a fancy term, but that's exactly what we're doing with these conversations, decolonizing the discipline. And I want to share one phrase, another phrase by US anthropologist David Graeber. I'm sure you have heard about him. And he wrote a fabulous book about pirates and pirate history. And he says that when we only pay attention to the dominant view on history, we realize that it is not only deeply flawed and Eurocentric, but also unnecessarily tedious and boring. And I have to say, I agree. So I'm going to conclude. I'm going to conclude just inviting all of you to be open to understanding knowledge as knowledge, wherever it comes from. Not only when it comes from hegemonic or dominant spaces, but opening our hearts to understand what is happening in the periphery, how scholars are producing knowledge, and to work with our professional organizations in this, to recognize this, to not only address it from an academic perspective, but also from an applied and practice perspective. Because if we were to do that, anthropology will be a much better place, a much more fruitful place for us to work in. And the only way to do that, the only way to start is by looking inward and realizing what we're doing with our own colleagues all over the world, and start working on that, start changing that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Carla. It was wonderful to listen to your speech and a pleasure to have you here. And also, so we can take a break from the TV.
And now it's also time for a Periphery Vision talk. Carla and Dan will talk about the key insights we've heard from our speakers today. So, dear audience, we kindly invite you to also ask some questions after the debate. Anusha, here she is. She will give you some sticky notes and you will write down your questions to those sticky notes, and Anusha will give them back to Dan and Carla. And to all our online colleagues, please write your questions in the chat.
Carla and Dan, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, I have to admit something. I have what we call in this part of Europe Muskelfieber, or muscle pain, from yesterday's party aerobics that I went to prepare for this event. And today, as you can see in the background, we will not do the party aerobics, we will do some yoga pilates. So please choose your ball and have a seat, Carla. We'll see how it works. Yeah, it's quite okay. We can also jump. Yeah. Depends. I mean, if we get some interesting questions, we'll start jumping. And yes, please, to the live audience, please raise some questions, write it in the chat, and the live audience here in the room, write it on a piece of paper that you will get. And I also have some questions prepared, and the first one is a tricky question. So I will say one quote, and you will tell me what you think about it. The other in our geography is a site of disgust. The other in their geography is a source of pleasure. In our place, the other is a pollution. In their place, the other is romantic, beautiful, exotic. So I'm sure you recognize the quote. But what do you think about it? First of all, do you know actually from whom the quote is?
Yes, the quote is from anthropologist Edward Brunner, who was one of the pioneer anthropologists in studying tourism. And for me, the quote really represents this notion of how the West has had a racialized gaze on other communities, other populations, other groups. And in this case, it refers specifically to tourism, but I think we can extrapolate and make it be useful for our understanding of how the West has seen the rest of the world and why we need to make a change in that regard.
And I found, I have to admit, the quote in your book, so this is why I was quite sure that you know who is it from, in the conclusion of your new book titled From Temporary Migrants to Permanent Attractions. And tell us a little bit about the book. So it was published this year.
Well, the version in English was published in 2020, actually right during the pandemic, so it hasn't been read as widely as I wished. I hope that you read it, actually. And the translation to the book to Spanish was published December of last year. And
okay.
The
translation to Spanish was published last year.
Last year, and I had the opportunity to
quite recent and fresh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
So who are we? Who are they? Are we here, they, or are we, or what's the distinction?
I think it's a very complex situation. I think that all of the videos that we watched and my conversation hopefully highlight that the we and the they changes significantly depending on the context. But if we don't open our eyes to that complexity, we are missing a great deal. If we make assumptions about what is knowledge even, that's one of my pet things, we are missing a lot of information. We are missing a lot of wealth of knowledge that is there.
Somebody mentioned in the talk previously the term the global south. So what's your opinion about the term? I mean, it's a bit bizarre because, for example, Australia belongs to the global north somehow, China to the global south. So what do you think about this confusion? Should we keep the term? Should we throw it away? Should we rethink it? What's your opinion?
I personally think that it continues to be useful because it is a geopolitical term. It's not only a geographical term. It's not literal. In some instances it is, in some others it's not. It refers to the inequalities that exist in the world that have not been erased. The colonized mentality that many of us continue to have and continue to reproduce in educational systems at all levels. So for me, I continue to find it useful. In fact, you and I are working together on an edited volume that talks about why anthropology needs the global south. That's our main question. So I continue to believe that it's useful, recognizing that it has limitations.
And you moved from south to north, from Ecuador to the US, and now you moved for a shorter period of time from Newark in Delaware to Ljubljana. How do you see, from your perspective, as an anthropologist, as somebody from the South, the US, is it still the center of the world? Is Slovenia the periphery and Ecuador? How do you see these relations, center, periphery, north and south? So where do we stand?
I think the US continues to be a dominant power. I'm not sure if it's the full center of the world, but it continues to be necessary and present, and it continues to have quite a bit of power and leverage. And Slovenia is, according to some terms that I have read, a semi-periphery, not a periphery, and Ecuador is absolutely the periphery. Unfortunately, Ecuador has really no relevance in global politics, with some very minor exceptions. And that is why I think it's so interesting, and that's the story that I wanted to share with all of you, that coming from that tiny periphery, I was able to learn about a discipline in such an excellent way that it allowed me to continue my studies in a center without problems, except for the language problem. I find that really, really remarkable, I have to say.
You told us earlier a little bit about your story. So you were born and raised in Ecuador, which is, from the Slovenian perspective, not really a periphery, at least by the number of its inhabitants. It has 15 times, it's 15 times bigger than Slovenia. I calculated yesterday, and it's a home of 9 times more people than Slovenia, so there is a bit more than 2 million of Slovenian inhabitants in total. But in the global scheme of things, you say that Slovenia is semi-periphery, you think that Ecuador is a periphery. So still, tell us, how was it coming of age in Ecuador from your perspective? So how was it growing up there? And why did you move actually to the US? So what made you move? And do you feel homesick? I know that you often travel back.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate because I'm able to come back to my country often and to be with my family, my siblings. My niece is coming to visit for 7 weeks in January. I'm very excited about that. I'm very privileged. I have a great upbringing. I have fantastic parents and siblings and a middle-class background, which allowed me to go to the university in Ecuador, and I think which helped me remain curious and seeking for other opportunities. And that's, I applied for a grant that was available at my university, the Catholic University. I got the grant and I was able to go for my master's, then found all sorts of jobs and opportunities in order to continue for my doctorate degree, and found a job. So it was one thing after the other that allowed me to stay in the US and have opportunities like coming to this country, which otherwise it would have never ever happened.
And what do you like about the US? So we have often many stereotypes about living in the US. What's the image of the US globally? We talk about its hegemonic position in the world. So what do you like about it? What can we learn from the US? What can we bring, or what can we, working in anthropology or being applied anthropologists, use from the US approaches?
Well, my training and my background has mostly been academic, although I have worked on applied anthropology, have done numerous applied projects. And from that vantage point of being a professor at a university, one of the things that I find particularly helpful and wonderful about the US is that it's a flexible system that welcomes people from other parts of the world, which makes it always dynamic. There's always new thought and new people coming up as a result of that. That I find very, very enriching. And I have noticed that that's not always the case in other academic environments in parts of the world where I have been. So that's one thing that I absolutely rescue about anthropology in the United States. And also the efforts that so many anthropologists all over are doing at the moment to make sure that their students are well trained to continue their studies and to continue and to find a job. The truth is that in the United States, at least, more than 60% of anthropologists do not go to an academic job, do not continue as academics. They actually find jobs outside academia. And nowadays, there's a large movement of anthropologists all over the country working really hard to make sure that their students understand the skills that they are learning in order to be able to find jobs in a number of different fields. To me, that's also something that should be respected very much.
So this is not your first time in Slovenia, you already said that. So you're coming back, you keep coming back. I think it's your 4th or 5th time here.
I was trying to remember.
Probably you don't know yourself how many times you were here. What can the US learn from Slovenia? What do you like here? I mean, people say the nature, the environment, that we have, I don't know, 60% of the land is covered in forests. But next to that, what can the US learn from Slovenia and Slovenian people?
Yes, it could learn a lot. I see that people here have a high quality of life, and it shows in people's lives. I love that people are able to walk everywhere, take public transportation, all of those things that we are missing so badly in the United States. That notion that working should not be our main effort, it should be one of our efforts, but we should make sure that we have time for family, friends, and enjoyment. That, at least in academia in the United States, I see missing. I see a lot of work towards trying to recognize that we need to move towards a way of living that is more like in Slovenia, in that sense.
What's strange for me is that we don't collaborate more. I mean, I've also traveled a couple of times to the US, to the Society for Applied Anthropology meeting and other meetings, but we don't have any common research projects. I mean, we go here and there, present what we do. Why don't we collaborate more? Have you got any solutions how to be more productive together? How also to create something that could become, I don't know, global anthropology or global applied anthropology? Any ideas, solutions for that? And I'm not talking only about the Europe and US connections, but to bring all continents together.
I think that nowadays, since we have all of this technology that allow us to be so connected, we could find some solutions, some options. One of the first elements for the solution is to precisely have a conversation. Again, we have been talking about this since the 1960s, but perhaps now that we are at a different moment in time, we could come up with a network, a way to transform the conversation and make it much more even, much more equal, at a level playing field that is equal. I think that possibility can exist nowadays because of the technology that we have available. But first, we need to recognize that it is fruitful to do it.
Your list of academic achievements is really impressive, and I'm always fascinated in how many boards of different associations are you. So you're currently the treasurer of the Society for Applied Anthropology, one of the oldest, or maybe the oldest, applied anthropology society in the world.
Yes, it was founded in the 1940s.
And our network in 2010, if I remember correctly. You're also a member of the Outreach and Education Advisory Board of the American Anthropological Association, so AAA. And in addition, you've held several positions here in the EASA Applied Anthropology Network. You've served as advisory board member. Are you doing okay on the ball? Yeah. But it's good for the back, you know. Yeah, and you were several times also a member of the organizing team of this event, Why the World Needs Anthropologists. But okay, you have all these labels and titles, and you're in many boards and important associations, but why I like working with you, writing with you, communicating with you, and also having fun of partying with you is because you are, to be honest, a normal, straightforward person, a kind person. And how did you manage to stay this way? You know, how did you manage to remain this Carlita from the block, if I can paraphrase Jennifer Lopez, who was Jenny from the block. So how can you stay normal in academia? This is the question.
That is a question. But by the way, Carlita, it was my nickname. It continues to be, actually. And I learned that that my name was Carla when I was 5 years old. Before that, I swore I was Carlita. Everybody called me that way. So that's an endearing term for me. But I honestly see the opportunities that I have had and the opportunity to study, in particular in a country like Ecuador, as a huge privilege. It's not a right, unfortunately, in my country. It should be, but it's not. And because I've had that opportunity, that blessing, I cherish it with all my heart. And the normal part, I think, is simply because I think that I recognize that I know very little. And when I open my heart and my mind to interact with others, I learn from them, and we all learn from each other. So for me, nowadays, I have already gone through all the rituals, the rites of passage in anthropology, right? I did my fieldwork solo, etc. Now, I derive the most pleasure when I work with others, because I learn from them, I interact, I have fun with other colleagues, and that to me is much more enjoyable.
And you've also changed a little bit throughout your career, I guess, because you moved to the US and traveled the world, and you were involved in, as said, different associations, organizations. The world has also changed you, probably. So, coming to this question of change, so how do you think anthropology should change, or will change, or will have to change, to answer the crucial questions of today, including how to make the world safer for human differences, as anthropologist Ruth Benedict once said. So how can we, or should we, adapt anthropology to the new reality, to a more polarized world, to new peripheries rising in the world, to the world where, as we all know, populism is on the rise? So what can we do?
Of course, I'm only one person with one voice, but I believe fully in ethnography. I think that that's our superpower. That's the thing that we do best perhaps, and the thing that we should continue to refine and fine-tune. And I think that the discipline has morphed and has evolved. Nowadays we have digital anthropology, we have ethnographies. We use the same tools, the classical tools that we had, and we adapt them to the present time. And that is what allows the discipline to be more dynamic. But also, we have lended this superpower to others, because ethnography is a transdisciplinary method. It's not only at the purview of anthropology. So by collaborating with others, by using our ethnographic understandings and collaborating with other scientists and other scholars and humanists and normal people also from any society, I think that we can combine all of that and trying to find answers to the problems that we have. And anthropology, that's the beauty of anthropology in my perspective, and I apologize for talking so much about anthropology, but I actually do love it. I know that it has this very, very obscure origin. I know all of that, of course, but I do think that there's a great power in the discipline that maybe all of us have chosen for our lives. And this possibility of seeing culture as a system of interrelated patterns. That's what anthropology does best, and I think we should continue to work on that.
I'll just check if there are some questions from the audience, online or offline, or yes? Yeah, there is one question. So Anusha, please come here. And we have a couple of questions actually. Oh my God. More and more questions are coming. Okay, first question. I'll just randomly pick this one. What is the regional perception of tourism in South America in the relationship to the global South cultures viewed as the other? And then in the brackets, pop culture, social traditions, and connection to the environment.
The original view.
What is the regional, not the original perception of tourism in South America in the relationship to the global South cultures viewed as the other?
This one is difficult because I'm not sure which angle to take on that question. It depends on the location. In some locations, local or regional communities have welcomed tourism, have used tourism, have appropriated the possibilities that tourism offers in order to have better lives and better opportunities. In the case of the research that I conducted in Panama, for instance, Afro-Antilleans use tourism as a means to be inserted into a country that had always seen them as temporary migrants. That's hence the title of my book. So it depends. Okay. Quilombola communities, for instance, with whom I have also worked, have chosen to use tourism as a means to attain sovereignty. And in some other cases, the situation is very dire and tourism it has quite negative consequences. So it depends. Okay,
we have a nice question here. Will we see a time in future when anthropologists from the global south have the resources to research the global north, and by looking through non-Eurocentric theories?
I will absolutely love that. I will be there if that happens, and I would love to make it happen. So one way to do it perhaps will be to work together to create a network and come up with grant opportunities, financing these possibilities, these trips, these collaborations. That would be amazing. I would love to do that. And I think that being in the privileged position where I am, I actually could do it. So maybe I will do it.
Okay, so let's turn around the perspective as soon as possible. And I have one question for you too. So it's a very current situation that we are facing, that the world is actually facing, the US election in 2 weeks or so, right? So what will happen, in your opinion, about this duality of the center and the periphery if Donald Trump wins the US election? And what will happen to anthropology? So it's not an impossible situation, right? Now I checked today the polls and it's like 50-50 actually. What do you think? So what does the future hold for anthropology if one president is elected and the other?
I don't even want to think about that possibility, to be fully honest, but I think that anthropology can provide quite a bit of at least an understanding, and as a result of having an understanding of why things happen the way they happen, to have solutions for this situation. There are numerous anthropologists who have nowadays chosen to study groups like MAGA and other organizations that are supporting Donald Trump. And they come up with great ethnographies, again, the power of ethnography, to help us understand the underlying reasons as to why this is happening, before we can form a critical opinion, obviously. So I think that anthropology can help in that way. I hope that it can also help towards social change and transforming the situation if this tragedy were to happen.
Why do you think there hasn't been any anthropologist who would be brave enough to be a candidate for the US president? I mean, the closest we got was with Barack Obama, whose mother was trained as an anthropologist. So why are there so few anthropologists in important political positions who become global decision makers? So why are we just critical, and why don't we stand up, take the position and do something, change the world for the better, hopefully for the better?
Exactly, and I think that precisely applied anthropology, practicing anthropology does that. There are many anthropologists who work for senators as aides, not as senators, but they provide information that the senators then use to make policy. So that's one way in which anthropologists are present. But the discipline is quite marginal, unfortunately. I hope it weren't, but it is. And I think more anthropologists should become politicians. I will not be one of them.
Me neither. I mean, I told this in public several times. I mean, I don't want to go into this because you get your hands dirty, right, in politics, and we don't want that. But maybe we should. I don't know. Maybe you should. So how to persuade the graduates of anthropology to go into politics? In Slovenia, for example, if you're an actor, you can become the prime minister. If you're an electrical engineer, you become a prime minister. If you're an anthropologist, nobody has dared so far.
I'm not sure that, I'm not going to answer that, because I do not think that we should go that route, but I do think that we can influence politicians. Precisely because I don't think that we want to dirty our hands, right? But I do think that we have the possibility of influencing public policy, and we have done it since the beginning of the discipline. So many anthropologists have been public figures. It's just that nowadays the discipline has not been able to achieve that degree of relevance as before.
Okay, the final question. This is, again, a tricky one, of course. What does the future hold for anthropology, in your opinion? How do you imagine the future of anthropology in 10 years?
Again, I continue to think that if we continue to work hard at developing our ethnographic skills, we'll be able to continue to be relevant. And recognizing how we can translate those skills in a number of different fields and disciplines and jobs, if we continue to recognize that what we do is valuable, the future of anthropology will be bright. So one of our friends, Ryan Nolan, says it better, I think, because he says that perhaps we don't need more anthropologists, but we certainly need more anthropological thinking. And that holistic view of the world, that opportunity to suspend judgment before, in order to understand why people do certain things the way they do, and then have a critical perspective again, those elements that are so core, the core of our discipline, need to remain there.
Just one more question, please. So we have a couple of students here in this room too, and some of them are probably following us online. And how can we stop this mantra, the ongoing mantra, I will not get a job if I become an anthropologist? I mean, it's a kind of disease, I think, spreading now throughout the generation. I mean, what can we do to stop this? I mean, because anthropologists do get jobs, right?
Anthropologists
and
do get jobs outside
they get
academic
jobs
circle.
outside academia too. So
Yes.
how can we stop this self-fulfilling prophecy? Because if you come with this idea, if you start studying with this idea, then it could become a reality.
I can provide example of what is happening again in the United States, where there's this network called Anthropology Career Readiness Network, and it's composed of hundreds of people all over the US and abroad who are working hard at kind of distilling the skills that we learn in anthropology and making them really accessible to all kinds of individuals. So that's one way to perhaps take advantage of all that free information that is available at the network. That's what I do with my students. I have them explain to me what they are learning, how they can use what they are learning in practical terms in many job possibilities, so to eliminate the exoticism of the discipline. And the other thing is to start working on anthropological themes and maybe even anthropology itself from kindergarten up until university. So not to make it, again, exotic, to make it somewhat mainstream, so children can think about anthropology as an option and it doesn't become this very, very otherized discipline, this peripheric discipline.
I like this suggestion very much. So let's bring anthropology not only to primary and secondary schools, but to kindergarten. And then we have to explain in a very simple way what can anthropologists do and why the world needs anthropologists, right?
Yes, so just so you know, I am in a seminar, I'm leading a seminar of teachers from K to 12 who are learning about food from an anthropological perspective. And they, at the end, prepare units that are shared all over and teach anthropology, in this particular case, through food to their students. So there are many ways in which anthropology can become more mainstream.
We'll take one more question from the audience. Anusha, thank you very much. Okay. The final question from the audience. What would be your take on the previously mentioned relationship between the academic, more observational position an anthropologist usually takes up and the moral role or responsibility in applied anthropology?
Yes, that's one misconception about anthropology, because the discipline itself started as an applied practice, unfortunately for very negative consequences to expand colonialism, but it was applied. And nowadays, again, we have had this distinction between academic and applied that is so problematic. Latin American anthropology, in fact, has characterized itself for being very committed to social justice and transformation. That has been the entire aspect of its core. Argentinian anthropologists, for example, see themselves as militant anthropologists in many circumstances because they see the moral responsibility as ever present. There's simply no denial. And this assumption that you can be a detached observer and simply observing and not exert change is highly problematic.
So to quote Karl Marx, and to paraphrase this famous quote, which is engraved on his tombstone, the purpose of anthropology is not only to observe the world, the purpose of anthropology is to change it, right? Hopefully for the better.
For the better, yes.
And with this thought, we conclude this panel discussion. Thank you so much, Carla, for keeping coming back, not only to Slovenia, but to why the world needs anthropologists. I'm sure this is not the last time we meet here. at this event. And we'll announce soon, I guess, where the next event, 2025, will happen. Thank you, Carla Gueron Montero from Ecuador and University of Delaware.
So, Dan and Carla, thank you so much. Before we conclude, we want to thank our organizing team, organizers and supporters who made this year's edition, Why the World Needs Anthropologists, happen. We would also like to thank our speakers who kindly prepared such interesting videos and shared their knowledge with us.
Our organizers and supporters are
Research Center of the Slovenian Academy of Sciences and Arts, Applied Anthropology Network, University of Ljubljana, European Association of Social Anthropologists, Society for Applied Anthropology,
University of Delaware, Institute for Innovation and Development of University of Ljubljana, the Global Anthropology Project, and Slovenian National Building and Civil Engineering Institute.
And also thank you, dear audience. Without you, this event wouldn't be the same. So I hope you all enjoyed this edition of Why the World Needs Anthropologists.
Which wouldn't be possible without our amazing team. So thank you, Dan, Carla, Olivia, Anna, Simon, Lena, Anusha, and you, Anya.
No problem. And thank you, Gaspar. So see you next year.
Wait, no. There is another day. On the second day of Why the World Needs Anthropologists at Home event, we will see what people around were talking about in the last few weeks regarding our topic with two lovely presenters, Anna and Olivia. This event will start tomorrow at 5 p.m. at Zavetiška ulica 5 in Ljubljana, so where the Department of Ethnology and Cultural Anthropology is.
And don't forget our annual IAN network meeting happening also tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the same location Gaspar mentioned, so Zavetiška 5. And also you can also join us online. The link is in your WWNA registration email, so please check the email to get the link and join us in tomorrow's meeting.
And this is also a good opportunity for new members to join the Applied Anthropology Network. There are some open positions, but more about this tomorrow.
It was a pleasure hanging with you guys, so thank you so much and good night.